I'd run away with you. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Okay, so episode number 3 of the Value Quanta series. And this one asks the question, where do your resentments lie? Ooh. And this is one of the questions that I ask in my life regularly, personally and professionally. Although I guess you can think of it in the context of your job or your profession. But I think ultimately, anyway, it's personal. But I guess I found it useful for my own purposes to separate them into personal and professional. But once again, where do your resentments lie? And this is a question that I started asking myself after reading Jordan Peterson's work, but then also getting more into Jung's work because of Jordan Peterson. And seeing a lot of parallels in the exploration of one's shadow. And I thought, oh man, I'm in customer service. This is perfect for me. Because the more I can get a grip on my own mental, my own psychological strength, the better. Not only for myself, but how I work with others. So, again, this is something I ask myself on a weekly basis. And it's really an attempt to keep things in check. So what I started doing was paying attention to the circumstances that created frustration, anger, impatience, or similar feelings, all in that sort of realm. Is there anyone that I dealt with in my work that brings out negativity, envy, jealousy? If so, why? And I really had to be open and honest with myself about these things, since they may even be occurring without my own conscious awareness. They kind of just happen. And I'll get into that in just a little bit. But before this, like kind of the prerequisites, if you will, was the ability to first be humble enough to say, man, like, I'm definitely not perfect. I have flaws. And again, going back to the Jungian shadow, was first acknowledging it. That these feelings of anger, of resentment, I've really hated people in my life, at least to like that sort of deep hate. But even like borderline feelings of hatred or just annoyance, these come from a darker place within, and it's just kind of like, okay, that exists. So now let me familiarize myself with it. Let me try to understand it within myself. So the prerequisite was kind of the ability, or the acceptance, the acknowledgement that, okay, I have to do that in order to be able to really effectively ask myself, where do my resentments lie? And my job, my profession, being in customer service, was such a great way to apply it every day. And then also in my personal life too. It applies anywhere. But I found it especially useful because, dealing with coworkers, dealing with customers, all of those things, like, it affects everything you do. And I found that the emotions associated with resentments, no matter how small, could manifest in how I behaved or communicated, and it concerned me a great deal. Some examples would be just a blatant lack of concern of myself or others, customers, coworkers, being short or offhanded remarks, sarcasm, or being passive aggressive. And fortunately, I've always been pretty sensitive to that type of thing. So I haven't made any significant lapses in judgment in that regard, but I definitely noticed that I have in the past. And I still will, I think. I have a pretty good handle on how I communicate, but you never know, right? I'm sure that type of thing will happen. But asking this question, where do my resentments lie on a consistent basis, has been incredible. Because I'll notice those areas or those situations where I do show a lack of concern, or I get angry or annoyed or frustrated. And I'll say, what's going on here? And I look early on in my career when I first started in account management and customer service. And it's almost like you're pure in a way, you're kind of willing to do anything. I found I wasn't really getting frustrated. I was willing to help, and I wanted to help it any way I can. I wanted to make my mark. I was super impressionable. And you have this, or at least I had this picture of people being all good, and you're not going to get taken advantage of, and people are going to be generous, and you have unlimited energy and youth, and you can dedicate your time and all these things to it. And then as time goes on, you kind of, or at least I got a picture of, well, no, that's not always the case. Not everyone is cool. Not everyone will react in a certain way. You won't react to everyone in a similar way. You only have so much energy and time. And there are people that are going to take advantage of you, or at least try to, coworkers or customers. And I found for me that was a hard lesson, and it happened, or in other words, it happened the hard way, where I really didn't know. And then there's those scenarios where you're taken advantage of, or you're frustrated and you don't really know why. And asking again the question, where do my resentments lie, helps keep that in check. Because something that goes unchecked for so long, whether it's in your work or your personal life or in a relationship, if it goes unchecked, it grows. The resentment grows, and then it becomes all consuming. And at that point, it'll likely manifest itself, because it has to eventually, in a way that you can't control. And then the anger comes, you say something that you don't mean and you can never take back, or your behavior is very bizarre and full of that resentment, of that anger, that bitterness. But from a customer service standpoint, and this really, they'll manifest in different ways depending on the context, but some of the ways that I found in my career would be, and once again, as a reminder, the career I've been in is more of a long-term relationship building type scenario, where there's a bit of transactional business, but very little, and everything you do means a lot, because you are developing long-term working relationships, and you have to see these people often, and you have to work with them often. So it's really important how you conduct yourself long term. And some of the ways that I've found for me, these sort of the bitterness or the frustration or the resentments, and the way they would manifest themselves would be, maybe call screening. Just seeing a certain person call, and you're just like, ugh, here we go. Or, maybe because you've often associated problems with them. There's always a problem, or something like that. Others include how you react to hearing from people or being contacted by certain people, especially when things are being asked of you. And most of the time that'll be the case, because that's your job. How well are you respected among your coworkers? How well do you send social cues? Do people really want to be around you? When, mistakes are made, do you blame others? Do you kind of take that fear of rejection, or that something's gone wrong, and dump it onto others, blame it onto them? And that might create, it very likely will create, resentments in them toward you. What about requests that are made outside of typical business hours? That's kind of the blessing and curse of a job like this, is you have flexibility, where you're kind of on the road and you're traveling and you see people and you can kind of make your own schedule and do things like that. But it comes with the burden that you have this phone, you have a computer that's portable and that can always be used. And so you can always be contacted. And I found it very difficult personally to disconnect. I just, whether it's the notification or I just feel this need to be there, which is great in a lot of ways, but it's an added burden to not be able to disconnect. So, what about when requests are made of you outside of your typical work hours? How do you react? And I check in with myself regularly on these things, and I really suggest that you do too. And the goal is not to be perfect, because that's not going to happen. Some of these behaviors or feelings will manifest themselves, but the key is to keep things in check and use this analysis to learn about yourself. Because if you don't keep them in check, as I implied earlier, they will manifest in snapping at someone or becoming angry at someone that doesn't deserve that anger, or just mood swings or general feelings of malaise or dissatisfaction. Resentments are a mental burden, and I believe they affect everything you do, whether it's in your workplace or your personal relationships, whatever. And another aspect of this, I should say, a way in which that these resentments can be created in oneself. And I've kind of discussed, I think, the symptoms so far, like the call screening or how you react to certain people. But I think those are more symptoms. But a cause, I think, rests in or can be discovered in the question, am I being taken advantage of? And another one, a corollary would be, or do I just need to accept responsibility and grow up? So the first one, am I being taken advantage of? This is something that I really had to confront myself, because I do, but I had, especially, in the past, a difficulty in saying no to people. And that's likely why I ended up where I am. My personality aspects, I'm highly agreeable, which is great for this role, and why I've really come to embrace it. But I had to buttress these personality aspects by being able to say no. And also acknowledging the value that I offered, or that I offer now, but previously I had really no gauge of that. I was always reactive. I always thought the burden was completely on me, that people didn't have to meet me halfway. It was all, and I mentioned this, I believe, in episode 1, where I thought the outcomes were solely reliant on me. And not in a selfish way, but I just put so much burden on myself. And when you're being taken advantage of, it's super difficult, I think, to not become resentful if it goes on for too long, because I think in essence you're feeling like you're doing more than this person or persons deserve. And it's at the expense of yourself. And the question of where do my resentments lie has been extremely valuable in me being able to discover where that applies. Who's causing these feelings? Am I causing them on myself? And identifying the certain areas in the context and the specific situations of where you believe you're being taken advantage of is super valuable, because then you can say, listen, if I feel I'm being taken advantage of here, I need to speak up. It is on me to speak up and communicate what I need to communicate, whether it's to a customer, whether it's to a coworker, your boss, maybe someone that works under you. It is your responsibility to either speak up or, and this leads into the second question, do I just need to accept responsibility and grow up? Do I just need to bear that burden? And that is also a possibility too. There were times in my career where, you know, things are a pain in the ass. There's things you don't want to do. Or maybe, something that I think people fall into as well, especially later in their careers where they're more experienced and they've put a good amount of time in, is they don't feel they should handle certain responsibilities anymore. I know you leave that to someone else, leave that to the new guy or girl, or leave that to this person. But for myself, in any area where I feel like, this is something I don't really want to do, or, maybe the customer, as an example, isn't very cooperative, or they're not a very nice person, I just say to myself, listen, this is my job. This is what I'm here for. This is what I'm being paid to do. This is the responsibility that I've taken upon myself. So suck it up and just do it. And then maybe I can change things or shift resources or change the interpretation of the scenario. Maybe I can reframe things and then work at it to maybe not necessarily change things in my favor, but just to where I can deal with them a little bit better. And I don't necessarily feel like it's too much of a burden or something like that. It's accepting responsibility and growing up. But once again, these two questions, am I being taken advantage of, or do I just need to accept responsibility and grow up, are amazing ways to really dig deep into each scenario and work on them and accept them. And where do my resentments lie is an amazing start, because that will, I'm sure when you ask that question, it'll pull you to different circumstances and areas and people that are likely causing that, and you can go from there. And something interesting, this is more with customers and people that I meet in a business context, but it can also be in personal relationships and friendships too. A key question that I ask myself is, when it comes down to it, does this person actually care about me and want to create a mutually beneficial relationship? And for me, this is a part of how I gauge where I spend my time and of how committed I am to supporting them. And if the answer I feel that's appropriate is no, they don't care about me and don't want to create a mutually beneficial relationship, that's okay too. I'm here to do a job and to serve others when they need it. However, this is a great thing to ask yourself, because I found that I'm more inclined to go above and beyond for the people that want to support me and genuinely care. And that may seem kind of silly. It's almost automatically implied, right? It's self-evident. But it wasn't, for me anyway, for a long time. And it's not to say don't offer assistance where, let's say, it's less deserving, because again, you're here to do a job and do it very well. And the better you can do it in circumstances that are more difficult, that's pretty unique too, because I think you learn a lot. But where you can nurture the most fruitful and meaningful relationships, I think that's where you will be more inclined to go. And asking the question, I found for me has been super valuable is, does this, when it comes down to it, really, does this person or do these people actually care about me, and do they want to create a mutually beneficial relationship? And, it's also important to be honest with those that expect more from you than their their business practices may dictate. How can I? So what I mean is, you might find customers that demand a lot of you. However, they give very little in return. From a relationship standpoint, from interaction, from just general business practices. And some examples from my own experience include, quoting people. There are certain people that may demand a lot of you from quotes, from a quote perspective. Hey, get me some pricing on this, and then, this, and this. And you do those things, hoping that you can get something in return. But there may be those situations where they'll take advantage of that and use those prices that you quoted and to give it to some other guy and just say, hey, listen, this is the pricing I'm getting from this guy. Can you beat it? Or they won't. You'll likely run into someone that won't hesitate to take advantage in other ways. And I found that's also an area where resentments developed. And that's another very valuable area to look. And it's important, as I implied earlier, to be honest with them about it. And say, hey, so-and-so, I've quoted you a dozen times, and I've had no feedback, or I've had no response. I have not won any sort of order or anything like that. What's going on? This is time. This is resources. What's going on? Why am I not winning these? And say, listen, I only have so much time. I can only dedicate so many resources to your cause if I'm going to be taken advantage of like this. So it's that goes back to the am I being taken advantage of? And if so, speak up. And I think it goes without saying to be professional about that, to do it in a way that's respectful, but also honest and realistic. Because if they're a reasonable person, they'll understand that. So you know what, you're right. And maybe they'll see that you care about the business, that you care about working with them, and that you want to work with them, and they'll change, or they'll maybe warm up to you, or you'll never hear from them again. And if that's the case, then I think it could be a win-win, just depending on the context. So either something needs to be said, or you need to suck it up and deal with it. So once again, going back to the question, where do your resentments lie? I think it's super valuable to use this in a professional sense, but also deep down in a personal sense in your day-to-day life and how you interact with others, because I think it affects all of those things. I believe it affects everything you do. And the more you let these resentments fester, the more it will manifest in ways that you can't control, and will create just more chaos, more uncertainty, and they'll be more difficult to deal with in turn. So, what do you take from this? 1, pay attention. See how you react to these types of things in your career, especially, this applies to any career, but especially in customer service. Pay attention to the circumstances and the people and the scenarios that create frustration or anger or impatience or similar feelings. Pay attention and ask the questions. where do my resentments lie? Number 2, ask yourself, am I being taken advantage of? When you have an idea of where these resentments are, ask yourself, am I being taken advantage of? If so, I need to speak up and address them in myself and in whoever or whatever are kind of helping to create the resentment. Or do I just need to accept responsibility and grow up? And then 3, sort of a little key I've found, or bonus that I found when working with people, is when it comes down to it, does this person actually care about me and want to create a mutually beneficial relationship? And you may not be in a career where long-term relationships are an aspect of it. It may not be conducive to that type of thing. It may be very transactional. And then that'll shift the perspective slightly. And that's about yourself and controlling your own mental and controlling how you deal with people for once. It's doing your best to put your best foot forward, your best self in that one interaction on a day-to-day basis. And at the same time, because of that, because it's transactional, I think it also affords some room to just not take things so personally. Just go with it, be the best person that you can be, and not take that tough scenario that you had with that person the one day too seriously. Learn from it, acknowledge it, and if it went super haywire, and I've been in those scenarios, accept responsibility, learn from it, and then use it to improve your own mental game. Transactional, retail worlds, those are tough, man. Those are very tough. And that's what I love about customer service and just interacting with people in general, is it creates these scenarios that are difficult to deal with psychologically. And I love that. And every interaction is an opportunity to learn. So once again, where do your resentments lie? And be honest and open about it. And it will open up knowledge of yourself and also of how other people are likely to behave and react that will be incredibly valuable for you in your career. Okay, so that's it for episode 3. And I really hope that you enjoyed it. And episode 4 is on the way. And until then, take it easy.